I will never forget the Christmas when everything became clear. I was about 10 years old, and the December cold barely managed to freeze the warm atmosphere of the house, full of lights and decorations. My mother, as always, was radiant, supervising every detail of the dinner, while my father gave instructions with the seriousness of a general. My sisters, of course, were the stars of the show dressed in new, expensive, and elegant clothes. They kept showing off their new dresses in front of the Christmas tree. And me, they told me to wear whatever I had at hand. But the worst came with the gifts. You see, it is not that I expected great things. I was used to my parents being selective. My older sister received a shiny bicycle, a model that surely cost a fortune. The younger one, a video game console with more accessories than she could use. And then came my turn. My mother, with an awkward smile, handed me a small package. It was a toothbrush. Yes, a damn toothbrush. It was not even electric. I remember looking at my parents, looking for some sign that it was all a joke, that someone would pull out a real gift from behind the sofa. But no, my mother's awkward smile was all I got. My sisters laughed, and my father did not even look up from his plate. That night, sitting in my room with the toothbrush in my hand, I understood something that, until then, I had tried to ignore no matter how hard I tried. For my parents, I would always be a footnote in the history of our family. It was not a matter of money, because they had it. My father ran a profitable business, and my mother was in charge of projecting the perfect image of a happy family. But that perfection never included me. Every time there was a family event, my sisters were the first to be introduced, while I was left in the background, invisible. And, of course, the grandparents were the only ones who noticed my absence. My grandparents, they were the only thing that made all this bearable. Whenever I could, I spent the weekends at their house. My grandmother cooked my favorite food, and my grandfather taught me about life, how to fix things, how to stay strong even when the world tried to bring me down. You are different, and that is a good thing, he used to tell me. I never knew exactly what he meant, but those words were a balm for my wounded soul. In every conversation, in every act of affection, they tried to fill the voids that my parents and sisters left. They never told me directly that they also saw the injustices, but I noticed it. My grandmother, especially, used to give my mother looks when she ignored me at some family gathering. And my grandfather, with his quiet wisdom, used to say things like, "Time puts everyone in their place." Back then, I did not understand the weight of that phrase, but I kept it in my mind. While my sisters enjoyed undeserved privileges, I became the boy who went unnoticed, but who listened and observed everything. I learned not to expect anything from my parents, not to seek from them the recognition that would never come. However, the relationship with my grandparents was different. They made me feel worthwhile, that I had something special that the rest of my family did not see. And, even though I was the forgotten son, that bond with my grandparents became my anchor. They taught me that even when the world turns its back on you, you can always find your strength in the most unexpected places. What I did not know then was that this strength would be what would save me, and that one day the world of my sisters and my parents would crumble around them, while I emerged stronger than ever. But, that Christmas night, I was just a boy with a cheap toothbrush and a heart full of wounds. I did not know that everything was about to change. Over the years, the feeling of being invisible within my own family became commonplace. I learned not to expect anything, not to get my hopes up, not even with the smallest things. My sisters continued to be the focus of all the attention, the princesses of the house, while I transformed into a shadow, someone whose existence seemed to matter no more than fulfilling basic tasks or following the rules of the house. The most ironic thing is that my parents were not bad people. From the outside, they looked like the perfect family. My mother was always organizing events, making sure everything was impeccable. My father, with his authoritarian but fair attitude, was in charge of keeping up appearances. But behind that facade, there were favoritisms that were impossible to ignore. Everything revolved around my sisters. And, even though I did everything possible to stand out, to be part of that world, it was never enough. If I got good grades, I barely got a well done. If I achieved something special at school, they did not even mention it at the table. It was all about them. Always them. The only place where I felt seen, heard, and valued was at my grandparents' house. They were my refuge, my escape from that suffocating reality. My grandfather had a way of speaking that made you feel like you could conquer the world. He was a simple man, but full of wisdom. Do not let anyone tell you who you are or what you are worth. He would tell me every time he saw the sadness in my eyes. My grandmother, on the other hand, was pure warmth. She always knew how to cheer me up, whether with one of her homemade stews or simply with a hug that seemed to contain all the love I was missing at home. It was during one of those visits that my grandfather first spoke to me about the future. He took me to the garden, his favorite place, and while watering the plants, he told me something I would never forget. Life has curious ways of balancing things out. Sometimes it seems that some have everything and others have nothing. But over time, destiny takes care of adjusting the accounts. I did not fully understand his words at that moment, but I kept them like a treasure. Meanwhile, at my house, things continued in the same pattern. My sisters received everything they asked for and more. Their birthdays were spectacular events, with dozens of guests, lavish decorations, and gifts that seemed to come from a luxury catalog. My birthday, a dinner at home, if you were lucky, and a gift that, at best, was something practical and cheap. I remember one particular year when my younger sister received a new car when she turned 18, while I, at the same age, received a pair of school shoes. The difference was insulting, but I did not even bother to complain anymore. What for? I knew it would not change anything. Little by little, I got used to being the invisible son. Instead of seeking their approval, I began to focus on what really mattered to me. I studied harder, worked hard to save, and planned my future without counting on them. I learned to be self-sufficient, to depend on no one but myself. Deep down, I think my parents thought I would never amount to anything, that I would always be in my sister's shadow. But they did not know that I was building something much bigger than their superficial world of appearances. Despite everything, there was something I could not ignore: the relationship between my grandparents and my parents and sisters. Although my grandparents tried to treat everyone equally, it was clear that their patience with my parents was beginning to wear thin. My grandfather, especially, did not hide his displeasure with the way they treated me. I cannot understand how anyone can be so blind to what they have in front of their eyes. I heard him say once, with a tone of frustration he rarely showed. What I did not know then was that my grandparents were planning something that would change our lives forever. And when that moment came, my family's priorities, their luxuries and their privileges, would be questioned in a way that no one, not even I, had anticipated. Things started to change subtly, almost imperceptibly at first. But now that I think about it, the signs were always there. My grandparents, who until then had been the core of our family, began to adopt a more reserved behavior with my parents and sisters. Family gatherings, which used to be moments of celebration, became more tense. My grandfather no longer participated as much in conversations, and my grandmother, although still sweet, began to make comments that clearly made my parents uncomfortable. I remember one particular lunch. We were all sitting at the large wooden table in my grandparents' dining room. It was one of those sunny days where everything seemed perfect from the outside, but the tension was palpable. My mother was talking enthusiastically about my older sister's wedding plans, while my father chimed in occasionally with proud comments. My sisters, as always, monopolized the conversation, talking about their lives, their friends, and the things they wanted to buy or do. I, as usual, remained silent, concentrating on my plate. But my grandfather could not contain himself. Suddenly, he put his fork down on the table with a thud and, with a calmness that concealed his obvious anger, said, "And what about you, son? How are your plans going?" All eyes turned to me, and for a moment I felt the air had become thicker. I was not used to being the center of attention, much less in such a hostile environment. Before I could answer, my mother intervened with a dismissive tone. "Oh, you know how he is. Always so reserved. I am sure everything is fine, right? Right?" My sisters giggled, and I felt small, as if I were being ridiculed in front of the only two allies I had at that table. But my grandfather did not let the comment slide. Reserved does not mean invisible or insignificant. Maybe we should worry more about what we do not say and less about what we say all the time. The silence that followed was deafening. My mother looked away uncomfortably, while my father pretended to check something on his phone. It was at that moment that I understood that my grandfather was tired of the family dynamic, of seeing me constantly relegated. From that day on, I noticed that my grandparents began to dedicate even more time and attention to me. My grandfather invited me to his office more often, and our conversations became deeper. He talked to me about his life, his businesses, and above all about the importance of integrity and perseverance. He told me that a person's character was not measured by what they had, but by what they did with what they had. One day, while I was helping my grandmother clean the garden, she took my hand and looked at me with eyes full of tenderness and complicity. "You know you are special, right? You are stronger than you think. And although it may not seem like it now, good things come to those who work hard and do not lose faith." That phrase was etched in my memory. It was as if she knew something I could not yet imagine. What I did not know was that my grandparents were making plans to secure my future. Meanwhile, my life at home remained the same: invisibility, contempt, and favoritism towards my sisters. They continued to receive expensive gifts and enjoy luxuries I had never known. However, something inside me had changed. I no longer felt the same need to fit in or seek my parents' approval. I had begun to focus on my goals, on what I wanted to achieve. And, although I continued to visit my grandparents regularly, it never occurred to me that they were about to change my destiny forever. The day everything became clear came unexpectedly. We were at a family gathering at my grandparents' house, something that had already become a routine event. My grandfather, with his usual calm, asked for our attention at the end of the meal. "We have made some important decisions," he said as he rose from his seat and looked at everyone seriously. The room fell completely silent. My parents and sisters looked intrigued, but I noticed a different glint in my grandfather's eyes, something I had never seen before. "It's time to talk about the future," he continued, and those words marked the beginning of a change none of us expected. The atmosphere in the room changed completely with my grandfather's words. There was something in his tone that indicated this was not just any announcement. And, although my parents and sisters tried to maintain a calm expression, I could see the curiosity and anxiety on their faces. For my part, I felt a mixture of intrigue and a growing feeling that something important was about to happen. My grandfather, standing next to my grandmother, held the gaze of each person in the room before continuing. "For years, we have observed how the family has changed, how priorities and relationships have evolved. And I think it's time to be clear about what really matters to us and what we want to leave as a legacy." My mother gave a nervous laugh, trying to lighten the moment. "Well, Dad, we know you have always cared about keeping the family together. Isn't that the most important thing?" But my grandfather did not smile. His eyes remained fixed on her, and his answer was direct. "A united family means nothing if there is no respect and real values to sustain it." That phrase hit like a hammer. My mother seemed to shrink in her seat, while my sisters exchanged uncomfortable glances. My father, as always, avoided getting involved, focusing on the tablecloth as if it had a fascinating pattern. I, on the other hand, felt that my grandfather was speaking directly to my soul, as if those words were a secret message designed to reinforce what I already sensed something was about to change. My grandfather went on to explain that for years he had been evaluating how to manage the family estate. He spoke of the importance of responsibility and effort, of how today's decisions affect future generations. Then he paused, and at that moment the silence was almost deafening. "What we have decided," he said in a solemn tone, "is that the legacy we have built must go into the hands of someone who values it, cares for it, and uses it for good. It is not about favoritism or automatic inheritance. It is about doing the right thing." Then he looked directly at me. My heart skipped a beat. I could feel my family's eyes fixed on me, full of disbelief and, in some cases, contempt. Before I could process what was happening, my grandfather continued, "That is why, after much thought, we have decided that it will be in my name who will receive control of our properties and resources when the time comes." The impact was immediate. My mother gasped in disbelief, and one of my sisters practically spat out the coffee she was drinking. "What?" exclaimed my older sister, her voice full of a mixture of rage and surprise. "That does not make sense. We have always been the ones closest to you, the ones who visit you, the ones who have taken care of the details." My grandfather raised a hand to silence her, his expression calm but firm. "Do you really believe that? Because what I have seen is years of contempt for someone who has always strived, not to seek recognition, but to stay true to his principles. And we value that more than any superficial gesture." My sisters began to protest, one after another, their voices becoming increasingly shrill. My mother also tried to intervene, saying that this was unfair and that my grandfather should reconsider. But he would not be intimidated. "The decision is made," he said with an authority that left no room for discussion. In the midst of all this chaos, my grandmother spoke up. Her voice was soft, but just as firm as my grandfather's. "This is not about dividing the family, although I understand that some may see it that way. It is about recognizing the one who has shown humility, effort, and a pure heart, and my name has shown all that and more." I felt like the world stopped. On the one hand, I was in shock, because I never imagined that something like this could happen. On the other, I experienced a sense of validation and strength that I had never felt before. However, at the same time, I could not ignore the looks of hatred and envy my sisters were giving me, nor the expression of frustration on my mother's face. The rest of the evening was a whirlwind. The arguments continued. Emotions ran high, and I could barely believe what was happening. I retreated to my room at my grandparents' house, looking for some peace. That is when my grandfather came to see me. He sat down next to me and put a hand on my shoulder. "I know this will not be easy for you," he said in a calm voice full of meaning, "but I want you to know that we trust you. because we have seen what you are capable of. And although it may seem like a burden now, one day you will understand that this is an opportunity to make a difference. I did not know what to answer at that moment. All I could do was feel, as I tried to process everything. But deep down, I knew that my life had just changed forever, and that from that moment on I would have to face the consequences of that decision, both good and bad. The following dinner was anything but quiet. My mother, furious and on the verge of collapse, avoided me completely, as if she could not bear to look me in the eye. My sisters, on the other hand, did not bother to hide their anger. Their passive-aggressive comments started to fill the air. "I hope you do not forget where you came from when you have all that money." My older sister snapped, her tone laced with venom. The younger one, even more direct, exclaimed, "I guess you will not have time for us now, since you will be so busy and important." Although the words hurt, I tried to stand firm. There was something liberating about knowing that this time I was not going to give in to their manipulations or my mother's attempts to play the emotional card. But I honestly was not prepared for what would come next. That same night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard my sisters arguing in the living room. I could not resist and decided to listen from the stairs. "This cannot be left like this," my older sister was saying. "It's ridiculous. All our lives we have been told that we would inherit everything. Why do they give it to him now? Of all people?" The younger one replied in a furious whisper, "It is obvious that they are trying to punish us. But this cannot end here. What can we do to reverse this? Maybe if we make him look bad, they will change their minds." I could not believe what I was hearing. They were actually conspiring against me, trying to manipulate the situation so that my grandparents would change their decision. I felt a mixture of anger and sadness. How had we reached this point? All I wanted was to keep peace in the family. But it was clear that for them, it was not about love or unity, but about ambition and control. The next morning, my grandfather called me to his office. As soon as I closed the door behind me, he began to speak with a seriousness he rarely showed. "I know all this is being difficult for you," he said, "but I need you to remember something. The real test is not receiving something, but how you handle the reaction of others. Your sisters are not going to make it easy for you, and probably neither will your parents. But I trust you have the strength to face whatever comes your way." I nodded, feeling a mixture of gratitude and responsibility. I knew my grandparents had put their faith in me, and I could not allow my sisters' venomous envy to destroy what they wanted to build. However, my patience was about to be pushed to the limit. The following days became a battlefield. My sisters began to spread rumors among other family members, saying that I had manipulated our grandparents into favoring me. My mother, always on their side, organized a lunch with some close relatives without prior notice. The subject of the inheritance came up. "It is a shame," said my mother with an exaggerated sigh, "that such an important decision has been influenced by selfish interests." I could not keep quiet. Selfishness? Really, Mom? All my life I have received crumbs, while you have done nothing but receive without even asking. And now you accuse me of manipulating? Maybe you should look in the mirror and ask yourselves why the grandparents think I am the most suitable person to handle this. The silence that followed was sepulchral. No one expected me to respond so forcefully, but I had had enough. For the first time, I felt in control, that I did not have to justify myself to anyone. After that lunch, tensions intensified. However, something curious started to happen. Some family members who had previously seemed distant began to approach me. "You know, we have always admired your dedication and how you care about your grandparents," one of my uncles told me. "Do not let criticism get you down. You are doing the right thing." Little by little, I realized that not everyone in the family shared the envy and resentment of my sisters and my mother. But the real test came a few weeks later, when my grandparents invited me to a family meeting to formalize some legal matters. There, in front of everyone, my grandfather spoke clearly and decisively. He explained that the inheritance was not simply a prize or a gift, but a responsibility. He detailed how he had reached his decision and made it clear that it was not about favoritism, but about trust. My sisters tried to interrupt, but my grandmother, in a rare display of authority, silenced them with a look. "We have observed all of you for years," she said, "and what we see in my name is integrity, something we cannot say about everyone present." That day, reality hit my sisters with full force. Although they tried to maintain a facade of indignation, it was clear that their battle was lost. For the first time in my life, I felt that I had found my voice, that I was not obliged to bear the weight of others' expectations and manipulations. That night, as I watched the sunset from my grandparents' garden, I felt a peace I had never known before. I knew that there was still a way to go, that resentments would not disappear overnight. But I also knew that for the first time, I was ready to face them. I had ceased to be the invisible one in the family now. I was someone who could stand on my own 2 feet, with my head held high and the support of those who really mattered. The day after that family meeting felt like an awakening. It was not just the relief of having faced my mother and sisters, but something deeper, a kind of inner peace I had never experienced before. But there was still one last chapter to close in this story, and I knew it would not be easy. The open wounds in the family, the accumulated resentment, and the latent envy would not disappear overnight. My sisters, defeated but not completely resigned, tried one last move. A couple of days after the meeting, I received the news that they had spoken to a lawyer, looking for ways to challenge my grandparents' decision. It's unfair, they claimed. All this was done behind our backs. When I found out, I did not know whether to laugh at their desperation or feel sorry for them. Did they not realize that the problem was not the money, but their obsession with controlling everything? I decided not to stand idly by. Although I was not looking for conflict, I was not going to allow them to destroy the legacy my grandparents had entrusted to me. I met with them privately and told them what was happening. My grandfather, always the firm but fair man, looked at me with a mixture of sadness and determination. Let them do what they want, he said. Sooner or later, the truth always comes out, and what we have decided will not be changed. Still, I felt uncomfortable. I did not want to spend my life in a legal battle with my own family, so I decided to confront my sisters directly. I met them at a coffee shop, in a neutral place, and when they arrived, with their usual air of superiority, I made sure they understood that I was aware of their plans. You can try whatever you want, I told them, looking them in the eye. But let's be clear, I am not going to fall for your game. My answer seemed to unsettle them. They looked at each other as if searching for a strategy, but for the first time they had nothing. However, my older sister, always more adept with words, tried one last blow. This is not just about money. It's about respect. You have never had any. You were just the shadow in this family. And now suddenly you are the chosen one. It does not make sense. Her words hurt. I admit it. But this time I did not let them get to me. You're right, I replied calmly. I was never the favorite. I was never the one who had everything handed to me on a silver platter. But maybe that is why I am here now. Because I learned to value things, to work for them, and not to let envy consume me. If you want to continue with this, go ahead. But I am not going to waste my time or my peace. I left that coffee shop feeling that I had finally left behind a burden I had been carrying for years. My mother tried to mediate in the following days, calling to make me feel guilty. But this time her words no longer had power over me. What your grandparents are doing is wrong. They are destroying the family, she would say in her dramatic tone. Do you really not care what you are doing to your sisters? But my answer was simple and direct. No, Mom, they did it to themselves. Over time, tensions began to ease. My sisters abandoned their attempt at a legal fight, although resentment remained etched in their glances every time we crossed paths at family gatherings. My mother, although still distant, seemed to accept that things were not going to change. And my grandparents, although saddened by how things had turned out, constantly reminded me that they had made the right decision. The most surprising thing came months later, when one of my aunts, someone I had never had much of a relationship with, called me to congratulate me. I always knew you were different, she said. And now that I see how you have handled all of this, I am convinced that your grandparents made the best decision. Do not let them bring you down. Her words filled me with strength. Little by little, I began to invest the money I had inherited in projects that reflected the values my grandparents had always instilled in me: humility, hard work, and the importance of helping others. I opened a foundation in their honor, dedicated to supporting talented young people who did not have the resources to study or pursue their dreams. Seeing the results of that effort, the smiles of the people who benefited, was one of the most gratifying things I have done in my life. Today, when I look back, I realize that this path was not just about money or inheritance. It was a journey to discover who I really am, and to break a toxic cycle that had ruled our family for generations. I did not become the person I am because of what I inherited, but because of how I chose to face the challenges that came with it. And although my relationship with my sisters and my mother will never be the same, I am at peace with that. I learned that sometimes the most valuable thing you can inherit is not something material, but the strength to stand firm in what you believe, even when it seems that the whole world is against you.